our military and Hanford cleanup. And so really great lessons that I think could be applied broader to other areas of the government. And great to see our new ranking member, Senator Markey. I know I'm probably feeling ancient at the moment, but it's not that long ago when Senator Kerry was the chairman of this committee, and he brought a lot of energy to the SBIR and other important technology startup issues that were a big part of the discussion at that time. So look forward to working with both of you on the committee. And it's good to see my former colleague again. Congratulations on your nomination. You and I had a chance to talk briefly in the office. I wanted to bring up a couple of things. One, we had this question to Mr. Lutnick today at our Commerce hearing, but do you support the Minority Business Development Authority?
Senator, thank you for your time in your office. I enjoyed our conversation. Certainly, I appreciate that program that the Commerce Department runs and see that there's potential for collaboration between SBA. I really do support working across the administration to ensure our resources are utilized and we don't have overlap in our programs, and that they're serving Americans who need those services the most.
Thank you. And will you work with me to make sure that the Department of Agriculture meets this same small business set-aside challenge that DOD has so successfully done? But in this case, the Department of Agriculture really isn't giving our small mills the access that they need. And so will you work with me to make sure that those important SBA issues are addressed at the Department of Ag?
Senator, I appreciate our conversation about your timber business. I think if confirmed, I would look forward to working with Secretary Rollins to ensure that we have a collaborative relationship. I understand there was previously an MOU with the Department of Agriculture, and hope that we can collaborate to support small businesses in that regard as well.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And when it comes to, let's just carry that on. One of the reasons why we want this infrastructure is because if you think about reducing the fuel that we need, and some of the ideas like cross-laminated timber, you need to have the mills in those regions. And so to get the mills, you have to have the agreement that you're going to give them some supply. But now look at the disaster we just saw in, California, and we realize this situation is, we already knew this in the Northwest. We've had our share of pretty big dramatic fires, but there was a border crossing issue in Sumas where a town was flooded, and then a town of Malden where a fire wiped through the town. Over 300,000 acres burned in wildfires in my state just in 2024. So how do we make sure that we keep politics? I feel like so much politics happened on federal funding in the last few years. How do we keep the politics out of it and disagreements and make sure? There was a case on the Malden fire where it was delayed for months about a disagreement between the president then and our governor, and it took a new administration. And this was even though Kathy McMorris Rogers and I were working together to say, let's do these funds. And how will you help us make delivering disaster assistance urgently without all this noise that we're hearing?
Senator, I appreciate the question, and I think, and certainly your state has had its share of disaster. You had the bomb cyclone in November that, and on ongoing recovery from that. I think Americans were stunned by the politicization of the hurricane response under FEMA, where they refused to go to homes with Trump signs in the front yards. Americans want to see the end to that. We should not be politicizing our disaster response. I think that that's something that we have to restore confidence in, and certainly the SBA will be working with the Trump administration to restore integrity to the relief efforts.
I don't know whether the chair has had this issue, but probably, because there's disasters everywhere. And that is this whole debate about the way the funding model works currently in taking care of communities who've experienced disasters. The urban communities, because they have density, are taken better care of, and the rural areas, although a rural community is a rural community. Sumas is an example. It's right by the border. It hangs together. If Sumas isn't there, I'm not sure we can sustain that border. What will happen is it'll get closed down, and then what? All the traffic will then have to go down I-5. So it's a bad idea. Or in the Met-Tal, we had an economy that was devastated, and people were like, no, we're not going to help you because you don't really have the same ratio. I'm like, it's a juggernaut of an economy. Just because it doesn't have density doesn't mean that it isn't a big problem. So the GAO concluded that the SBA needs to recognize that rural communities experience disasters differently. Not really differently, they're devastated. It's just they're not in the same density. So as we consider how to make SBA loans for small, vulnerable rural communities more viable, do you think businesses and homeowners, we want them to return to these areas? We don't want to see a community, in our case, these are communities that sit on close proximity to the Cascades, but they're a huge tourism economy for the whole state, so they have a big footprint. So what are your thoughts on how we implement this SBA change, working with our colleagues, to get a better recognition of the economic impact that disadvantages rural communities?
Well, Senator, I would love to work